Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this morning. This is, as you're probably aware, the last call of this year. We've had 34 of them up to now. So thank you to all of you for joining us and being part of our network events across the year. As always, we will be recording today's call, as you just heard. If you've got any questions, messages, points of cheer, jokes, whatever, please do use the chat box at the bottom of the screen. We will once again be recording it, and it will be available on the Pimento Catch-Up video channel on YouTube. You just have to search Pimento Agency YouTube. I don't know about you, but around this time of year, I particularly enjoy the kind of warm chestnuts, the open fires, the richly spiced mulled wine, the smell of pine needles, and of course, the reruns on TV. But most importantly, I really enjoy a comprehensive review of the past year and predictions for the next. And it's that time of year, the time of year where we begin to start to reflect upon the last 12 months and begin to look forward to the next 12. It's pretty safe to say that it's been a hell of a roller coaster this year, and I fully expect the coming year will be pretty much the same. But that doesn't stop us really from speculating as to what we might see. Today, we are in the capable hands of the two best viewed speakers of the Pimento year, the witty and irreverent Lee Warren and the CMO David Weldon. So thank you to them both for joining us. Their tasks, along with all of you, will be to review the marketing, business and political year and to look forward with a positive cheer, I hope, to 2022. We would welcome any questions throughout this informal session, and given it's Christmas and 1 p.m. in Athens, and I don't know, Stuart, what time it is in Australia where you're joining us now, why not charge your glasses and have a bit of Christmas cheer as we go through this informal chat today. And by way of a reminder, for those that don't know Lee and David, Lee is a professional business keynote speaker, conference host, and author of the best-selling The Busy Person's Guide to Great Presenting. In his previous life, Lee was sales director at News International, and he uses his background both in magic, theatre, and sales to give presentations, keynotes, and coaching to inspire people to become more persuasive, present better, and increase their ability to get their messages across. David Weldon is perhaps the most senior and well-regarded CMO of them all. Drum Magazine gave David the Marketing Award Lifetime Achievement Prize in 2020. Previous winners include Keith Weed and Richard Branson, no less. At the end of 2020, David stepped back from being global CMO of RBS. Earlier on, he'd also stepped back from being president of the World Federation of Advertisers. He started his career as an advertising agent, working as MD of Lohad Spink, before that WCRS, and president of BBDO Europe. He moved to Atlanta to become global director of advertising for Coca-Cola. He then ran Team Vodafone for WPP before being poached by his client to become global head of brand for Vodafone. Vodafone, under David's tenure, became the UK's most valuable global brand. Later on, he became global CMO at Barclays, helping rebuild their business after the financial crisis. And then he was then approached by the CEO of RBS to go and do the same. So we're in great company. I hope we're going to have some fun. It's that time of year again, and I really would like us to enjoy the next hour together. So first of all, I'm going to say thanks for joining me both, gentlemen. Really appreciate your time. I know it's a busy time of year. Ordinarily, I know you'd be out up and down the high streets buying your wife's Christmas presents, but you've made time to join us today. David, can I start by asking you, what's your 21 been like?
Well, morning, everybody. I would say, well, first of all, I regret deeply not having a glass in my hand now, but I can't really pop out and get one, can I? It's not been bad, actually. And I should almost feel guilty about saying that because, at my age, there are 2 or 3 things you must start all conversations with. A limitation on how much I can talk about my health, limitation on how much we can talk about COVID, and a limitation on how much we can talk about Brexit. So I've had a healthy year. I've avoided COVID so far. Most of my family have. And I haven't been doing what most of you have been doing, which is working non-stop like this. I've had enough of this to keep me entertained and engaged, but I've been more of an observer of what's happened in the world of work than I have a full-on participant. And I've got to travel. I went cycling in Albania. I can recommend that highly, but make sure you do it on an electric bike, unless you're really in the lycra mode. I still do stuff for the WFA, who conferred me with one of those things that makes me sound like I'm dead. I'm the president emeritus. I've had some great conversations in their Better Marketing podcast. But yeah, not bad. Thank you very much, Stephen. How about you? You well?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, very good. I'm feeling very end of year-ish and looking forward to some sort of time off. And obviously concerned like everyone is at the moment about the moving rules and regulations, but fingers crossed we'll actually make it to Christmas and have one this year.
Yep.
Lee, can I introduce you to everybody?
Good morning. Yeah, I think I've met, certainly recognise a lot of faces on the call. Nice to see everyone again. Well, it's been a curate's egg of a year, really. So I mean, my year's been divided personally and professionally, and personally, I've had some ups and downs, all of which I've survived. Professionally, it's been fascinating. I mean, it's all good stuff for the autobiography, isn't it? Everything we've lived through. The one thing I am suffering, I got the COVID in September, so weirdly that felt like a relief actually to get that and get over it finally, to look towards a winter of probably not getting it again. But the big downside is my sense of smell still isn't back. So you've made me yearn for the smell of mulled wine and pine tree. I can't smell any of it. Weirdly, I've got this slight sensation that someone's smoking near to me a lot of the time, which is a weird thing. But professionally, it's been fascinating actually and challenging. And I'm sort of the opposite to David in that I've spent most of my time in this virtual environment, and I've had to learn how to be good at it in order to keep delivering material for my clients.
Have you managed to sort of step back into the real world since there was a relaxation? Have you been out sort of in front of people again?
Yeah, and weirdly, I've got 2 more gigs in the real world this week, including one on Friday afternoon near to Moorgate for 300 people in a hotel. And I even sent them an email first thing this morning and said, "Is it still on?" And they've replied, "Yes, it's still on." I mean, I'll believe it when I see it when I'm in the room. I'm slightly astonished. I can't believe most of their staff won't pretend they've done a lateral flow test and don't want to go to the event. But yeah, I've done quite a lot back in the room actually, and. I mean, I think, well, we'll get onto this later, I guess, but I think hybrid is going to be the word for 2022, really. There's so much hesitancy and nervousness around real world events and quite a lot of angst and difficulty in organizing them and keeping them safe and so on.
Yeah, it's very tricky at the moment. I understand that. And it's surprising, unless, of course, you're the warm-up act for their Christmas party.
No, they're having their party in the evening. They're doing a proper sales conference on Friday, and I'm the keynote speaker, and apparently it's going ahead.
Well, it's good to see you back out there again. Tell me, David, it's been if we sat back here, I guess, a year ago and thought about what 21 was going to be like for agency land, I think we'd have been very surprised as to how quickly it's bounced back. And in fact, lots of agencies have had a bloody good year. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, I think in times of crisis, creativity has often come to the fore. I haven't seen Cabaret yet, but everybody who's seen it tells me it's the best thing ever in the theatre, and it's worth remembering that was, the worst time when the Nazis were outside and they were on the inside trying to make the most of it. So that parallel of creativity doing well when times are hard is one that you can see. I also think that agencies, I hate this word, pivoted brilliantly to working remotely and found ways to get things done that meant the service was seamless. And that's been astonishing, actually. Now, it's led to a couple of other things which we'll come on to, burnout and so on. But yeah, I think a great year. I mean, I should declare a minor interest here. I'm the non-exec chairman of Pablo, who's sitting top of the New Business League and have had a sensational year, actually. And I admire what they've done. Nothing to do with me, I hasten to add. But actually, when you watch how they've done it, they've had to do it like this. They actually gave up their offices and they donated the rent instead to Crisis. So they've done smart things. They've managed to attract and retain talent, and they've done great work. And they've even done great work for DFS, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
So interesting to watch agencies. Not so in the groups. I would say, because the losers of many of these pitches, interestingly, are the groups. And the groups, whilst they benefited from the economic boom, so look at their recent results, they've all done phenomenally well. They are probably the ones that are seeing the great resignation up close and personal. There are many people leaving big agency groups because of burnout, wear out, and actually a little bit of that is the short-termism of having to deliver for the city. So I think independents in general have done brilliant. This is great for everybody on this call, of course. And I think there's another reason, which is when you're in the independent business, the people that turn up to run a pitch and do it are almost certainly the same ones that continue to work on it. So you get the A team all the time. So yeah, agency business, I think, has done phenomenally well, and looking forward, looks like it's going to continue to do that. Well, as I said, let's come on to talent drain and diversity and inclusion later.
Sure. That's, I mean, I think you make a very good point. I mean, Pueblo only won nearly £100 million worth of new business. If you then look at New Commercial Arts, which is James Murphy's new agency, Neverland and Uncommon, those are all fantastic independent agencies, all of them in the top 10 for new business growth last year. The latter, Uncommon, recently picked up the BA business, winning that obviously from one of the groups. And you wouldn't have thought, even 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago, you'd never imagine that British Airways would part their business with an independent agency with one office. It's just demonstrated to me, I think, how COVID has leveled the playing field between international groups and domestic independent agencies. And I agree with you. I think that's going to continue, hopefully, into the new year. If we think a little bit about, the point you just made about attracting and retaining talent, it's interesting. Pablo have obviously done very well in that space. It's very much the case at the moment, like almost, I think, from August onwards, where people started to realise that business was picking up. They then recognised very quickly that they'd laid off talent during the COVID period, furloughed people, or frankly, as you say, the Great Resignation. A lot of people just said, "Not for me. I don't want this anymore. I don't want this life." How are we going to attract people back into the world of marketing and agency life? How do we make it more attractive?
Lee, I don't want to screen hog, so chip in, please. But I think by celebrating what makes agencies an interesting place to be, that recent survey that Richardson has wheeled out again, where advertising executives are the least trusted of all, less so than politicians and less so than bankers, all of which is a mystery to me. I've never done politics, but I did work in banking, and quite how fine people like you can be less trusted than bankers, I've got no idea. But that I don't think should be a preoccupation. It's an interesting business that gives you an opportunity to scan across everything, to learn and develop constantly, and to be involved in the creative arts. What's not to love? Now, what's not to love is being worked to the bone, being paid not much for it, and being abused on a regular basis by your management and your clients. And that's what's been happening. If you look at exit surveys where they're available, I mean, Glassdoor is a great resource for this. An awful lot of people just feel that they've been abused and have gone, no, enough already. Then there's another wave of people, and this is more in the Great Resignation. The FT had an article this morning about the city that's growing like a train in the UK on the property market. It's Winchester, because they've got enough city about it, but it's near to the countryside. People are leaving London in droves and reassessing their lives and thinking about it. That's common to all sectors, but I think this is a sector that has to be proud of itself, stand up and talk about the great people that are in it and the great things you can learn and do. I mean, I love the marketing and advertising sector. Quite why anybody want to work in anything else, I've no idea.
I totally endorse that, and I totally agree with what you're saying there. I mean, Lee, you must presumably, because you're up in front of lots of different brands, lots of different companies, not just within the communications advertising sectors, but you work across lots of the brands that they serve. What's this? It's a similar situation there.
It's absolutely identical. I mean, the same words come up again. And so just for anybody on the call, I haven't met before, I don't run an agency. I'm not an agency person. I'm a workshop facilitator, keynote speaker. And so I go into businesses and improve often the sort of sales side or pitches and so on. So I get to meet lots of different industries. And yeah, retention and recruitment, they're two of the big words that have come up across every single industry. Actually, one of my biggest clients during this whole weird time has been the NHS, actually, at a very senior level. If you want to see real retention problems, the NHS is quite extraordinary, and some of what they're having to do to try and keep people is quite extraordinary. And I don't think anyone's got the answer to it, but there's no doubt we're living through a profound time of technological change that none of us really understand. You know, it's up to historians decades in the future to explain to us what we're living through. But pretty much all revolutions, I think, are preceded by a few things, and one of those things is rapid technological change. I mean, printing took down monarchies and religions and so on. So we're living through that, and part of what comes out of that, I think, is unpredictable. But there is one thing that seems to be true, which is that the way we behave in a crisis quite often tells people who we really are, and many brands that have behaved well in a crisis are now during this crisis now in a better place to retain and to recruit. And so many of the businesses I've been working with have really looked at their own behaviors, and not necessarily just agreed with everything in terms of the Great Resignation. So not necessarily just given employees and potential employees everything that they want, but they've tried to maintain a level of behavior which is adult and collaborative and reciprocal, and that seems to have paid dividends.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously, you're a man that keeps his, ear to the ground in working across all those different businesses. It's really interesting to see how brands, clients are responding. I'm going to bring Annabelle in now, because Annabelle was talking about, she also recently gave a keynote, I think, at the ICCO Global Summit. Annabelle, can you just give some insights and some feedback from that session?
Yeah, I mean, I'm echoing Lee, really. Those companies that have behaved well have come out on top here. And by behaved well, I'm assuming you mean that they've listened better to their employees and worked out what really makes those employees' hearts sing. Why do they want to come to work? And I think COVID, for all of us, gave an opportunity to, well, the privilege amongst us to sit back and think what's really important. And I've mentioned in the chat here that flexibility, that whole agenda has been rapidly accelerated. 5-6 years ago, we wouldn't have dreamed that we'd all be sitting here doing this and meeting as many people as we do online. So flexibility, and it's, presenteeism is out the door now. This is about what you can achieve wherever you're sat. Autonomy, to be trusted and to get on with the work, I think is really important, and harder perhaps for juniors and those onboarding to a new business straight off. But I think it's for agency leaders to really develop that trust quickly, and it's a give and take about good training and bringing those juniors on quickly. And a sense of purpose. I think we've seen this a lot. I mean, I know my personal circumstances, not having to commute into London anymore, has clawed back 12-16 hours a week of travel time. And so I've been able to put a lot more into what can I give back, what can I do? And I think employees increasingly feel that, what is it beyond improving the bottom line of the agency they're working for? What is it that they're coming to work for? And if you can get everybody to wrap their arms around the sense of purpose, why that agency exists beyond the profit, is really important. And that's shone through all the work we've done this year. And it might be that we're working with a self-selecting group of agencies that have invested in that way. But certainly the dials have shifted in terms of employee satisfaction and retention when leaders have really listened to that and responded to those things: flexibility, giving trust, and really understanding what people want out of agency life and what sense of purpose can they develop as a team to galvanise that culture.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Yeah, I've seen that quite a few places too. I mean, one of our agencies down in the West Country, down in Bath, Mr. B and Friends, they engaged and created a kind of a back to work new contract for their team. And it was a very open dialogue and piece of communication, which are then producing a beautifully designed manual for all of their team. And the essence of it was back to the points you just made now. But what they have said to all of their team is that you don't have to come to the office more than 4 times a year. There are 4 occasions during the year that we expect you to be in the office. Outside of that, it's really up to you. And those sessions are once a quarter when we sit down as a group, as a team, and we talk about life, we talk about the business, we talk about our clients and so on. Outside of that, you've got full flexibility to work, not only from home, but if you want to work from the south of Spain or you want to work from South Africa, as long as you could be on a similar time zone, and then we're more than happy for you to do that. So, interesting way in which things will develop. And we're going to see a lot more of that. I also think it's quite interesting that, we tend to find that marketing agencies tend to be leaders in this area. They tend to be innovators. They tend to kind of use their creativity, not just to create wonderful content and communications for their clients, but equally too, when it comes to actually thinking about their employees and how they work with them, that they're much more engaged around these ideas. Okay, let's move on. one of the critical issues, has been obviously COVID, and it's not going away anytime soon. We've seen obviously this almost lockdown by stealth being engineered in the last week or two, and regardless of whether you believe this requirement is as necessary as it's been put in place at the moment, is really up to you personally. But it's certainly obviously impacting on business. With the advice that's been given, people are pulling away from having meetings and going out and meeting with other colleagues and so on. So it's yet again, it's a demonstration of the seasonal fluctuations of COVID and its various variants. Thinking ahead, if the reality is, to both of you, that we are stuck in this COVID time warp for the next few years, how do you think businesses are going to be able to actually plan? How do you plan for a business when you just can't see those fluctuations? Or is it beautifully seasonal now? We have to play to that particular structure.
Well, I am going to say a really odd thing here. I learned a lot about risk and risk profile in my banking times. And actually the risk assessment that businesses go through for what does this look like for them for the future is pretty profound. So I think most sensible businesses know that this is here to stay and that they need to think about everything we've already talked about, but also, the protection, the duty of care they have for the people around their businesses. So back to your thing, Lee, whoever that is who's doing that thing on Friday is bordering on the nuts, with 300 people, but, their shout. And I'm afraid I must blame the government again for this, because my missus is Spanish. When you go to Spain still, everybody wears masks outdoors. Why? Because their first lockdown was so bad that it was then compulsory and they stuck to it. Here, I found myself trying not to be a grumpy old man when the mask stuff was kind of reduced and you go on the tube and 10% of people weren't wearing a mask. I mean, what? And they're still not, despite what's happening. So I think, we've got an irresponsible behavior, entirely understandable because we don't have role models at the top of the house, doing what they should do. And actually, when you've got a government communicating badly, behaving badly, what can you expect of your population? So that's the bit that makes it difficult for businesses. It's not, businesses can plan their way through anything and are doing that, and they've got hybrid models and they're all sorted. And most of the businesses I engage with, I'm astonished by how well they are doing and how well they're managing, despite what I just said. So it's the economic impact of the incompetence of the government that's a worrying thing. I mean, if you're in the hospitality business and you were just beginning to turn around again, and all of a sudden it's turned off, you go, oh, what? So I worry for business because of the total incompetence of our current government. But luckily enough, serendipity being what it is, we're doing this call on the very day that the end looks nigh for Boris. So something might change. Who knows? Sorry about that. I got told off for being political last time. But
not at all. This is everyone's views are welcome on this call. There's nothing off guard. So off limits rather. Lee, what about you? So what do you think?
Well, I think there's a few things. I mean, I completely agree with David. The messaging has been, whether one agrees or disagrees with the messaging, what you can't do, there are two things you can't do in public health education. And one of those is be confusing. And the other is rely on the intelligence of the public. And I'm sorry to say it that bluntly, but it's just a fundamental thing we know about health education. You have to spell things out, you have to be clear, and you have to be direct with messaging. So I agree that a lot of the fault lies with the messaging. However, I do think there's some good news as well. I mean, in terms of planning, obviously the old cliche, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst is still quite a useful rule of thumb. And to put it bluntly, which of us doesn't know there's going to be something 10 times worse than COVID next year, right? I mean, we don't know that COVID's the worst that's going to happen in the next few decades. But I think there are lots of, especially with client-facing businesses, I think there are some real opportunities and continue to be some real opportunities in terms of not only planning for ourselves, but also helping our clients to plan better as well. And in fact, one of the most, I mean, I run a tiny business compared to everyone on this call. You're looking at the international headquarters of my business. But what I found one of the most fruitful things to do in my own business is to everything that I'm learning and everything that's helped keep my business going is share that with clients. And there's been an enormous amount of gratitude and stuff that I've learned, you know, about how to be online, about how to be better with messaging, about how to get cut through, about how to reduce people's feelings of uncertainty and worry and stress. And I've given out as much of that into the world as possible. And the result in my own business has been great. So to really spell it out, I think whatever form of planning you're going through and whatever problems you're facing, if there's any opportunity to take that and to turn that into material which is useful for your clients and your partners, I would do that as well, because it speaks again to this behaving well in a crisis form of behavior.
Yeah.
I think somewhere on the call we've got Michelle Morgan, and Michelle, I don't know whether you would like to sort of step in and have your point of view on that. I mean, I know you do a huge amount of work in the sector, and you've just written a book on really a whole area of managing your uncomfortable and managing mental health issues. I don't know whether you're able to join us. Doesn't look like you are, but never mind. We'll come back to you if you're able to have a chat with us.
No, I'm here.
Hi there.
I might have slightly been caught multitasking with my my camera off.
No problem at all. Nice to see you. How are you?
Good to see you. I'm good, thank you. Yeah, a little bit tired, a little bit fatigued with that lovely phrase that I've noticed. Well, that I've coined myself. Productivity is up, according to a lot of the stats, but I'm now calling it pandemic productivity, and I'm not sure that's so good.
Congratulations on your new book, and very best of luck with that. I understand that's coming out in January. There, give it a quick plug.
It's always to hand at the moment.
Always to hand, always to hand. But actually, it's great. We've got a number of authors on today's call. Tell me, I mean, you've lived through the last 2 years. Your business is about getting out there. It's about, you know, touching and feeling and enabling and helping and so on. And as we've seen, you know, all the surveys that Annabelle does, surveys that we do, you've seen mental health issues within the communications and marketing area in particular just skyrocket. Are you finding agencies being more responsive to the need to help their people? Are they engaging you more?
Well, it's been really interesting. There was obviously that awful moment where everything fell off a cliff. Everything that I did was face to face, everything. So when the pandemic first hit, everything went very, very quiet. But actually, to your point, then a lot of my network is agencies, because I'm an agency founder as well. And then I found that those who had great culture, great leadership, and in fairness, who, you know, were not buckling under the financial strain and uncertainty, did then invest and look at ways that they could bring me in to have, you know, what I'm now calling those courageous conversations, and help equip people to have those conversations and not be afraid of self-care, not thinking that self-care is selfish. So I did it at the beginning, and then obviously this thing wasn't going away, and I was talking to publishers anyway about the book deal, and got close to signing the deal. And you know, part of my terms were that we could publish like in under a year, which doesn't usually fit with how a publishing cycle works. But I said to the publisher, look, I've got it in me, I just need to get it out. And then I need you to get it out so that it gets out at the beginning of January. So, you know, in fairness, there was a bit of time when I kind of went a little bit quiet because I was focused on writing the book. I have noticed that as I've sort of come back out and I'm out and about, I have found this last quarter disappointingly quiet in terms of agencies, agency leaders, HR people kind of investing in that kind of more immediate, Michelle, can you come in, or can someone else come in and do some training, do some support? I have found it quiet, and what I'm hoping is that, you know, there's a lot of planning for next year, or, you know, what I'm recognizing is that people are a bit heads down, but this thing that I call pandemic productivity is really hitting. A year ago, the Centre for Mental Health did some research, and there were 10 million people in the UK, of which 1.5 million of those were children and young people, who said they were going to seek help for, or had sought help for their mental health as a direct result of the pandemic. That was over a year ago. You know, the fatigue and the uncertainty, you know, is just unrelenting. And for me, I think that 2022 will be a really challenging year. And I do hope that people invest in this, because I absolutely believe, and obviously I would say this because this is my purpose and passion and mission, but if you think about putting mental health conversations, training, empowerment, skilling people up, self-care, courageous conversations, if you think of putting that at the heart of your culture, you will nurture your culture, and that in turn will bring business benefits to you. So I remember right at the beginning, final point, you know, one of my clients said, he said, you know, mental health training and investment just doesn't sit as a line on our budget right now. And I think that's really short-sighted. I think that's not being commercially aware, aside from the human imperative. Yeah, but we all know that. We all know the human imperative. Think about it commercially, invest in this area.
Thank you. Now, I mean, all sound and important points, and I think it plays back to what we were talking about earlier about the fact that agencies are woefully unresourced at the moment. They're running very, very quickly to catch up with probably 20% of their staff just not in place, rather. We've got a couple of recruiters on today's call, and we might bring them in later on to kind of get their perspective. But one of the positive impacts I think I have seen is the fact that at long last agencies are waking up to their D&I strategy, because there is a financial necessity and there is frankly a requirement not just to bring more diversity into their business, but frankly they need more bodies on the ground. They need more people in their businesses. Have you witnessed this, Lee, in action? Have you seen this, David?
Oh yeah, definitely. D&I has been, and in fact, it's I think both expanded both in terms of size and in terms of focus and passion. I mean, some organisations obviously do it better than others. Some sort of roll out tick box ticking stuff, and others do it really, really well. And I think I was gonna say something really interesting that was worth remembering and writing down, and then I totally forgot what I was going to say. So you'll just have to assume it was gonna be quite brilliant.
It's a senior moment,
and now it's gone. Anyway, but, I was going to. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to pick up on one thing earlier because it's quite a nice thought. When one of the I did a bit of research with a couple of clients around really sort of communicating internally and getting on better with the staff. And somebody had a wonderful phrase. They said, we try and treat everyone as if one day they might be a client. And I thought that was such a brilliant way. It sort of sums up or adds to what Michelle's just said, actually, treating everyone as if they one day might be a client. I thought was delightful. But actually also we analysed 4 needs, which sort of come a bit from a background of sales as well. And just in case it's interesting to anybody on the call, those 4 needs, and this applies to D&I as much, were that fundamentally people tend to be really satisfied if you can fulfill the need first to be heard and understood, right? So listened to and understood. I get you, I get your world. The second was to belong and contribute, to feel like you're making a difference, like you're not just a random cog in some vast machine, doesn't care about you. The third was to feel significant and special. So what I'm doing is making a difference. And the last one, which is not necessarily obvious, but I think is crucial in these times, is the need to feel stable and in control. In other words, when I wake up in the morning, I have some chance of feeling in control of what's going to happen to me. There's some stability. And D&I obviously speaks to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the WFA did a global survey on the sector, worth looking at Ad Age, published it, you can see it online. And this is a sector that's woefully underrepresented from a D&I perspective, actually, which we should all think about. And if you look at some of the initiatives that are happening, the School of Marketing doing a great job, Marketing Academy with their initiatives to try and make sure that actually the people in the industry become more representative of the population we serve. That's going to be a good thing. I mean, I do think, you know, you need to think of D&I in the round, and I definitely agree the mental health issue is something we should study as well, but an agency who will have to remain nameless here. One of the founders was telling me that he'd been in to talk to people about a pitch that was going on and said, oh, well, great, well, on Saturday morning, you know, what we can look at is this. And I think more than half the people went, excuse me, I don't do Saturday mornings. Now, on the one hand, massive respect for that, because that's correct. And on the other, isn't that the way that much of this business was once built? And I think that tension between how things used to be and how things have got to be needs resolving. And I completely agree with you, Michelle. The mental health issue is fundamental to building the culture. And Lee, those 4 things I recognize to be totally true. But don't lose sight of the fact that whatever we're saying here, the industry is woefully underrepresented from a D&I perspective, really woeful, and needs to do something about that.
Yeah, and increasingly ageism is the new ism in marketing. I mean,
oh yes,
I spoke to again, something I can't say it was, but within a large multinational group this morning, who told me that 14 executives who earned more than £250,000 have just been basically fired from the business with an average age of 53. So it kind of suggests to me that obviously, the agencies are getting younger and have asked to be very proud and excited with themselves when they announced last week that the average age of their employer base was 27 years old. I don't know what that's.
just to be fair, that was Dentsu.
I was Dentsu, sorry.
Pin it on Dentsu.
I should blame on Abbas, I'm sure they're much older there. But yeah, I made WPP, Mark Reed made a similar comment, didn't he, about a year ago?
Well, he did. And I mean, it's interesting because I would say this, wouldn't I? Look at the colour of my hair. But ironically, even though the sector has always been obsessed by youth, in the US, you will find a lot more people in senior positions inside agencies with my colour hair. When I say senior positions, I don't mean running the place. I mean like senior art director or something. The likelihood of being a senior art director in a network agency, if you're over 50, is that. And that is just nuts, because this talent and experience is needed. So, if you want to recruit people, I would also, start solving that. Look at those over 50s and more who've got the experience, who would probably take a pay cut and be grateful to fulfill the 4 needs Lee talked about.
Almost tempted to bring Nick in at this point, but I think I'll probably avoid it just in case we get a suit, Nick, from a recent example of ageism in action. We won't go there. So I'm going to change it up again now. And I remember at the beginning of the year when we invited you to come on the show, David, you spoke about, we set you up beautifully. In fact, we asked you to be CMO of Brand Great Britain. And we said that if you were given the task of rebuilding Brand Great Britain, where would you start and what would you do? Now, this was before COP26. This is before the nice trip down to the West Country. And we've had an interesting year politically since then. I'm not wholly convinced that our brand Britain is in any better state than it was at the beginning of the year, probably somewhat worse. What do you think?
Well, I mean, let's start with the data, always a good place to start. I mean, ironically, recent Ipsos survey shows that the youth of the world still think we're cool Britannia. And that's because of our cultural influence, our films, our music, our creative industries still land a big impact. The non-youth of the world kind of looking at us though as we gone nuts, actually, and that's because of the 2 Bs. Boris, first and foremost, is causing all sorts of confusion around the world. We've got our very own, I mean, it's quite odd to have our own Trump, but the difference is he's supposed to be clever. So, that's the world are kind of looking at our leaders and going, what's going on there? The survey that I've always loved, I don't know if you're Monocle readers, but Monocle do this thing on soft power, and here is their wonderful sparkly Christmas edition. And we've gone down to 9th, and it says good, bad. Under bad, it says Boris Johnson, beyond the UK's shores, his boosterism simply seems daft. That's not to mention the ongoing tensions with the EU related to Brexit. And let's remember that Brexit hasn't even started. I mean, Boris is, as we said earlier in the year, Boris has been lucky that the impact of Brexit was masked by COVID, a great irony in that. That impact will no longer be masked come January, and let's just wait and see what's going to come there. So I think brand Britain is in trouble around the world, and the data shows that. It is ironic, as I said earlier, that we're doing this the day after even his own backbenchers are looking like they might have had enough. But remember, what we were talking about is that how you build a brand is by focusing first and foremost on trust. And you build trust by being reliable, dependable, doing what you say and doing all of that stuff. And the trust has been so eroded in he as an individual and the government that we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. I can't recall anything. I've been looking at the history books to try and find one where the population in total would look at government and go, what's happened to them? That's not like it used to be. So, you know, I think Brand Britain's in a mess, but the two things we said from a positive perspective, that he had the opportunity to use the G7 and COP26 to put to rights some of our reputation. And I will doff my cap to COP26. I think that was, in terms of global conference put on in Glasgow to have an impact on changing the world, everybody that took part in that should be immensely proud of it, because it did make some kind of difference, and actually an important one, and people will remember that it happened in the UK. I hesitate to say that because people might remember that it happened in Scotland, no longer part of the UK, who knows. But you know, the COP26 I think was a success, and we got back on the world stage in a way we'll need to. But it's just a shame, you know. I thought, you know, as I said before, a fervent Remainer, but let me park that. Once I got used to Brexit had happened, I was thinking, well, great, we can get back on the world stage and we will find a way to leverage our soft power. And I'm sure we will do great trade deals, and I'm sure long term it'll all be fine. I no longer believe that. I think long term is looking really bad for us. And I'm not sure everybody's seen that. And I worry for my children, for instance, you know, the world that they're going to get here. So Brand Britain can recover, but it's going to be a long, slow recovery, I fear. And Lee, I know, has got strong views on this as well. So let me pass the baton.
Well, I'm equally. I'm married to a Spaniard, and legally I'm resident in Spain. So that probably tells you some of my although I haven't been able to get there as much as I'd like in the last year and a half. I think, yeah, I definitely echo some of that. And actually, I was speaking at a conference a few weeks ago that was entirely importers, and you could not unfairly paraphrase every single technical presentation as, come January, we're screwed, and nobody's woken up to this yet, and the government won't admit it, and that's the real problem. It was a slightly terrifying day to sit through, to be honest. And for those of us in service businesses, I think there'll be quite a bit of wailing and gnashing of teeth as the COVID problem of travel starts to dissipate to some extent, and we realize the border problems, and certainly transferring services across borders. I think there's going to be some fairly ugly wake-up calls. However, I think there is also no doubt there is still quite a lot of respect for a lot of what, if you like, Britain stands for. There's still a lot of fondness for many of us Brits. That's certainly what I feel traveling abroad, and particularly anyone who speaks more than one language. I think there are still many opportunities, and actually opportunities is the word I've sort of relentlessly focused on over the last year, despite all the problems, because it's the only thing that gets me up in the morning and keeps my business running. And in fact, I know for a couple of people on this call, I've delivered a session around finding opportunities. So at some point we'll move on to those.
It's interesting, we think about Brexit actually has been done, and I imagine the great majority of the UK population probably believe that's behind us now, but you're absolutely right. The impact that it's going to have on business and consumers this coming January really won't be apparent, of course, until it happens. And it's been hidden from the public, partly because of COVID and partly because I guess it's not good news. Anyway.
Oh, and sorry to interrupt you, Stephen, but if you want a proper wake-up call, look at other countries' government websites' preparation for Brexit. And compare them to gov.uk. I mean, if you go to the Netherlands Border Control, for example, website, and look at what they're recommending businesses do, it's quite a wake-up call in terms of what's going to happen next year. Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to, if I may now, sort of open up the conversation to everybody on the call, and there's an opportunity to both ask Lee and David their thoughts on any subject that you think is, you know, fair game. As I say, we're willing to have a chat about anything, and we've got 15 minutes to do it. So if you've got a burning desire to fire a question, please do so. We've got a few questions coming in on the chat box. Let's have a look. Yeah, I mean, obviously different points of view from people regarding Boris. Absolutely understand that. And I think that ultimately we have to kind of live with what we got for the time being until things change. One of the things I'd like to do, if I can bring in, Mark Palmer, who's been asking a number of questions. Mark.
I'll give my question. Linked to COP26. So one of the big things at COP26 was the finance area and businesses doing it. Yet at the same time, we have a record level of greenwashing perceptions amongst companies. So are we going to see companies stop pretending, because they'll either lose their staff or they'll lose their business? And how are they going to go about doing it? Is it going to be the year where we're suddenly transparent in what we do for the environment as opposed to green-sparent, if that's such a word?
Thank you, Mark.
I mean, I think that's already happening, Mark. I mean, I think many, certainly the financial companies, have really woken up to the need to start changing where capital goes and making sure that they're doing the right thing and the right investment and not greenwashing. And indeed, they're much encouraged by their now very vociferous employees, because if there's one lasting thing from all of this, you know, the pandemic production has also caused people to speak up and speak out a lot more than they ever did. And they're now informed in a way that they weren't prior to COP26. So you know, that's why I think it's been a success for Britain. And I think greenwashing gets called out by your own staff first and foremost. And that is, you know, going to be a problem because of the talent war as well. If you're not doing the right thing, you'll end up having nobody working for you. So that one I am optimistic about. I mean, I do think change will accelerate, and thank goodness.
Well, but just to put it out though, just on the ad industry, you've got Amazon running ads pretending they're environmentally friendly on the main requirements, you know, for the environment. They don't really score on looking after their staff, what they do with the environment. So the ad industry itself is actually culpable, because we're letting advertising be the brand greenwashing that we do to protect businesses that aren't very green.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that you know, I don't know if you saw that Facebook, or Meta, sorry, has now decided, only because the regulators have forced them to, that they will stop allowing all those scam people who've been stealing people's pensions to advertise on their platform. So they won't accept anybody who's not officially regulated by the FCA. I mean, quite why they could do that before. But, you know, I must insert here, don't get me started, because I blame the big tech companies for most of the woes of this sector and most of the woes of the world as well. And you know, can evidence some of that. But I do, you know, what can you do about people running greenwashing ads? What's a media owner supposed to do? I mean, that needs calling out somewhere else, doesn't it?
That's fair. That's fair. Listen, I also want to kind of, you know, we've probably not been overtly negative, but we've been reflective of what we know, which is what's happened this year. I think if we look forward to next year, we've got a rising advertising market. Advertisers are spending more, have increased ad spend, both in traditional media as well as what we used to call new media. So there are solid reasons to be quite positive about next year. Your thoughts, gentlemen, you know, what kind of key things do you think are going to happen in 22 that we can have some bit of Christmas cheer about?
I think there's a couple of things, and my work is sort of much less strategic with people really than sort of more technical and skills based. But I think there's definitely, so one of the things is this, I'm pretty certain next year is going to be hybrid, and everybody should be ready for it to be hybrid. So even at the level of, you know, come in and do an initial pitch next Thursday, and then on Wednesday morning the client says actually it needs to be online or it needs to be hybrid because half of our people can't come in. That kind of thing. But that world is a great leveler. It's a phenomenal leveler, particularly for agencies, because it really is possible. I can say this hand on heart because I'm doing it right now. I mean, you can run a global broadcast studio of very high quality with very, very little expenditure and very little learning. And it really puts you on a par with much larger, much better resourced companies. So I think that's a real opportunity for smaller businesses, that how much hybrid can be a leveler. But the other thing is this, it comes back to what David said about trust. And again, sorry to keep banging the same thing, but it's such a brilliant opportunity to build trust with employees and clients, going through problems, going through crises, and nobody knows the answer to this. None of us have lived through anything like this before. So we're all a bit at sea with it. Even the biggest and most important of our clients are a bit at sea. So the opportunities to build trust are huge. And then the third one is that there's never been a better time to network and to grow your network and and a phrase I use again and again. And in fact, I know I've sat with a couple of people on this call and gone through networking stuff with them, but build your network before you need it is such a key phrase. And the opportunities now. And I've had virtual coffees and meetings with people because we're in this strange times where if I'd walked into their buildings and asked for a coffee, I'd be thrown out at reception, you know. So it's such a great time to build connections and build trust and network.
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the economy will continue to grow, and financially things are looking pretty good for Britain. And there's kind of irony in that. You might wonder how all of this is going to get paid for. But, you know, that doesn't look to be a problem. I do think, you know, I used to say in lockdown 1 that how wonderful it was to see the return of kindness and how thoughtful people were, and wasn't that great? And one of the great lasting things post all of this would be that would stick and humanity would find its best self. I still believe that. I don't see that, by the way. I see lots of kind of people losing their temper and being very angry, but I do think, you know, that's probably down to the untold damage that this has caused humanity, which we haven't got into what's the long-lasting impact of it. But I think I'm expecting next year to be a really good year for us human beings, where everybody's more thoughtful than they have been, more engaged in how can we make things better, more aware of the need to grab those opportunities and fix them. And actually, it's the ad sector that can help influence a lot of that by being thoughtful about how things are done. So I am strangely optimistic.
Yeah, and I share both of those thoughts. I think, you know, there's plenty to be cheerful about. We've got 1.3 million open positions in the UK. And as you say, businesses are doing rather well at the moment. Let's hope that actually the COVID gets more into a seasonal structure that we can both work with and live with and get on with our lives, and find a way to do that. And I also hope and believe that actually some of the things we've been talking about today, D&I will become a burning issue through the requirement to actually not just do the right thing, but also to engage and find more talent from different resources and different thoughts to help to catapult agencies forward. So I think there's lots of really good positive things to take away from our call today. Just like to kind of end, if I may, with a couple of thoughts. First of all, in terms of trends and looking at the future, we've just produced a white paper that's been published and is now available on the website to download. It's free to download. Just go onto the Pimento website. Teresa, if you're able, if you could probably put a link in the chat box. And it's been put together by, I think, about 10 of the agencies within the network, looking at all future predictions to do with advertising and marketing, from the TV marketplace, articles on digital programmatic, to the development of AI, and so on and so forth. So lots more cultural shifting, lots more changing in company cultures, some of the things we touched on today. But please, if you get the chance to download that and read it, do let us know what you think. After the festive break, we'll be back on January the 12th with our first Business Development Club of the year, where we'll have the powerful force of nature that is Tina Fegan in the chair, talking about global marketing procurement and what's going to happen next year, what changes and she sees, what's happening with the independent sector versus groups. And we'll touch on that again. I'll get her views. She's never short of an opinion, and it'd be great to see her. And a final sort of plea to those that haven't already, there's members on this call today, the member survey, the annual member survey, which we issue, it'd be great to have your feedback. I promised that I would give everybody a prize if they got it back by the end of this month, and I'll stick to that. So there'll be a present winging their way to anyone who completes the survey by the end of the year, in the early new year. Really, really enjoyed our chat today, gentlemen. We've got 2 minutes left, or 3 minutes left, and I just wanted to fire one last question at you, and that is a topic we haven't really touched on today, but one that I know is omnipresent in our daily lives, and that is the kind of wokeism that has become our way of thinking, and also actually how it is evolving very rapidly, and how it's impacting on some of the decisions we make and how we behave. Subject matter in the 2 minutes you've got left, or does that need?
I think that was the buzzer that said this is a very difficult subject to talk about.
It's best avoided. Okay, well, we'll have to avoid it. If you,
No, not, I mean, not to be avoided, but I do think, you know, to try and be balanced about it is tricky, and to try and make sure you're doing deep listening to what's coming one way and to get that reciprocated, because, you know, I find when I'm in what I would describe as a woke chat that it's not often reciprocal. I do my best to go, well, here's what I think, but let me shut up and listen hard. You know, it doesn't always happen the other way around. So it's tough.
Yeah, and of course the rules are being written on a daily basis, so actually to be able to converse and to be able to understand. I mean, most of us, I'm sure, this coming weekend or the weekend after Christmas will be spending time with our loved ones, and it's likely you'll be in environments of multiple ages, from grandparents right the way down to toddlers, and it'll be a fascinating, I think, to see actually how attitudes are beginning to evolve and change, and just seeing the interactions of the generations. I mean, it was always the same. I just think there is more of it about these days.
I think also there's to come back. I mentioned earlier, you know, all revolutions are preceded by a few things. One of them is rapid technological change, and the other is division into tribes and binary tribes. I mean, the English Civil Wars was Roundhead and Cavaliers, and Spain was fascists and communists, and you know, being tribal comes very easily to us as human beings. It's extremely unproductive and very confrontational, and often leads to deep problems. So I think whatever anyone's views are, it's quite a good mental skill to be able not to attach your sense of identity to your beliefs, and not necessarily derive your sense of meaning from a temporary tribe you happen to be in, but to step back and not let your behavior be driven by tribalism. Sorry, it was a bit deep for Christmas, but
no, that's good. That's good. It's something you can take away. So, any top tips then on handling the Christmas lunch with the teenagers and the 20-somethings will be warmly received, and share with all.
chocolate.
Chocolate. Okay. Chocolate. Keep away from the wine would be the other one, I guess.
Yes.
Finally, I'd like to say thank you very much to both of you for joining us. Also to Rough Man, who's been busily scribbling in the background there and creating, no doubt, a wonderful piece of art that will be shared with everyone after today's call. I'd like to wish everybody on the call a fantastic Christmas. Enjoy it with the family or not, and look forward to catching up with you all in the new year, and have a good one, and have fun. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Cheers. Thanks
Bye-bye.
for a great year. Bye-bye.
Merry Christmas.
How do you do
Love
that?
it. Absolutely love it. I love it.
Oh, we're sad.